Welcome to the podcast series, Us and Them, brought to you by Heidelberg University's Graduate School for Humanities and Social Sciences. Tune in for thought-provoking interviews with experts in different fields, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. Hello and welcome, HGGS podcast series, Us and Them. Today, we have in our studio Alexandre Bretel from the University of Grenoble Alpes, and we are going to talk about the contribution of the philosophy of Hans Jonas, Günther Anders, and Hannah Arendt to the concept of responsibility in ethics of artificial intelligence. First of all, welcome, Alexandre.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this interview.
So, traditionally, we start with asking our guests about their academic background and also to briefly explain us why they chose this topic as their PhD research or as their projects and what was their actual academic motivation behind their choice of topic. So, I'm giving the stage to you.
Thank you. So, basically, I have a degree in law, political science, and philosophy. I also had a master degree from École Normale Supérieure in Paris and University Paris 7 in history and philosophy of science, and also a few internship in the computer science laboratory in what was then Paris 6. And what interested me always, I would say, at least from my master degrees, was about implementation of AI ethics, and more particularly with a branch of philosophy, which is ethics here. And until now, for my PhD, I'm following this path because I'm very interested about the cross-disciplinary fields between, I would say, AI and ethics here. And to deeply see how some philosophical authors could bring some useful information about our current situation.
So, is it possible to say that you are more concentrated on the practical applications of the AI in terms of your philosophical research, or are you bringing also the theoretical aspects within this approach that you are following?
I would say that the practical aspect serves as use cases on some part, but I have also, I would say, a more abstract approach, which is necessary because I will say that this is only in university that you could follow this kind of issues, because if you are more side of the companies, then you will have more concrete use cases and less about where our society is going right now. So, yeah, I have the chance to do that right now in my study.
We will also have a chance to talk about particular use cases in order to concretize actually the philosophical problems that we are going to face or we are already facing with the use of AI technology. But to clarify the subject a little bit more, maybe our listeners are really familiar with the ethics in the context of technology within a more broader framework. But how does AI ethics actually differentiate itself from the ethics in the framework of technology? And what does AI brings actually with itself so that we should also specify AI ethics as a different branch, as a sub-branch maybe in the framework of the ethics of technology?
Well, to put it bluntly, ethic of technology will be every reflection about how we use a technology, where it's going. And of course, AI ethics is more specific. If we should give a definition to AI, it will be trying to emulate what human could do in a task, for example. So it's more specific than if, for example, with my research right now, it's a little bit blurry between categories right now. So this is very interesting to see exactly how we can also interpret AI ethics as a way to better understand technology ethics.
Sure. And also there are many subdivisions of AI ethics, to name that, for example, computer ethics, algorithmic, robotic or artificial ethics, digital ethics, and UX AI ethics. I think it's also fair to say that AI is not a static concept right now because there are many expectations about AI and also the current situation of the AI, current development of the AI also creates some kind of challenges. And do you think that this categorization maybe captures all of the specifics of the AI, or we should also maybe expand on this categorization in terms of ethics, or how should we approach this domain of AI actually?
Well, to give you a few definitions there, computer ethics will be how you implement ethic in an algorithm, for example. If you take UX design, it will be how you design ethically AI system. If you take artificial ethics, it will be a more broad reflection about how we could use AI ethics. And I think that these categories sum up pretty well what we have right now as robot ethics, with speak for itself as a definition, which is about every robotic agent that could be used. And by the way, if you take a laundry machine, it could also be considered as a robot, even if there is no as much ethical consideration as other kinds of more advanced robots. But still, with Internet of Objects, you could also integrate it in some ethics of AI. So it's very broad. And there is also a paradox here, is that the more we integrate AI in our daily life, the less we see it. So we have AI as an idea of something that is always in the future, but no, it's already in our daily lives. But we don't see it that way because it's always appear to us as concrete use cases. It will be algorithmic recommendation. It could be something that will help you with your health, for example, something that help you to advance your work. So it's always in more concrete applications that it appears. That's why we don't always see it as AI anymore.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really insightful answer. And we are going to also talk about the term responsibility within this framework of AI. And you also chose 3 different philosophers in order to explain their thoughts in this framework, Hans Jonas, Günther Anders, and Hannah Arendt. So what was the grounding of your choice for selecting these philosophers in your research? Of course, they all involved in the research of the technology, research of the philosophy of technology, but were there any other reasons or how their views affected your research actually?
So, first of all, we can start with Hans Jonas. He wrote The Imperative of Responsibility. And to put it simply, this principle said that we should preserve authentically human life on Earth. And for that use, we should also use a heuristic of fear. But here, fear should not be understood like a simple emotion that without any rationality or logic or methodology. It should be more understood like a starting point. And then we can use some methodology to see if the fear is relevant or not, if we should continue to be afraid of something, if not, we should go to other threats. For Günther Anders, this is way more intriguing in the sense that he don't directly speak of responsibility, or if he speak of it, it will say about the difficulty to assume responsibility in a more difficult context, which is the one where humanity will have less and less paths to go with technology indifferently. So we are more and more, I will say, co-historic to technology. And he would even say that technology is the most driving force in a very metaphorical sense. Of course, there is always human in the loop right now. But if you take it from a metaphorical point of view, this is very intriguing and interesting. And there is, last but not least, Hannah Arendt, and he wrote a lot of things about the notion of responsibility. Especially, we can distinguish between the ethical and legal aspect of responsibility, and these aspects are way more individual, I would say, and what he called collective responsibility, which is more on the political sense. Later, we can give more concrete example about that.
Sure. Actually, it's also a great time to delve into this aspect of the term responsibility, because this term responsibility can have different meanings in different contexts. As you explained also in legal context, we are talking about maybe liability, and also in philosophical context, we have different categories of accountability. So would you like to maybe explain more about that distinction between these different terms that are related with the responsibility?
Yes. So if we take responsibility, it's often used as a synonym for ethic, which is not exactly the case, but it's understandable that we make the confusion because responsibility is very central to ethics. And if we see more closely the different concepts, responsibility will be about what is your role inside an organization. If we take accountability, it will be more about how you can be literally accountable for one's action. And liability, so liability is more about the legal aspects of responsibility. And there is also sub-notions like answerability. So concretely, if you can answer for your action, of the action of someone that you are taking care of, or attributability, which is if we can concretely attribute what is the action of one person, of one system, to the consequences of it.
Moving on to the term responsibility gap from there, actually, I'm going to quote the definition of the responsibility gap from your research, and it states that the current approach in AI ethics is to address responsibility as a change to be met in the face of growing gap between the attribution of individual responsibility and consequences of technology, particularly due to the black box phenomenon specific to the functioning of machine learning. Actually, we can also separate this sentence into two parts, and first of all, maybe elaborating on what is this responsibility gap and what problems are related with this responsibility gap.
Okay, so to put it simply, responsibility gap is a difference between what we can take as actions and the consequence of it. So, which means that it's not easy to always see what are the consequences of one action, especially with AI systems that are using deep learning or machine learning with the phenomenon of black box or gray box, because we can even explain some element of it. And it's not easy to say, for example, when you want to have a loan and that the bank use algorithmic systems, especially in the US, why they reject your application, or what it isn't so relevant for you to have a loan and so on. So there is a lot of cases where it's difficult to explain why a system took a decision. And there is another kind of trace here of ethical washing, which is, for example, to attribute someone to be responsible of a system, but this person doesn't really know why this system takes this decision or this other decision. So if someone should go away, it will be this person, even if they are not really in charge of what is going on here. So it's challenging to stay in tune with the need of more responsibility, and this is also something interesting because this difficulty to establish the foundation of responsibilities is also what justifies for Hans Jonas the fact that we need to put responsibility in the center of the ethical reflection. But here the center should be understood as part of a big algorithm or motor, which is interdependent of other notions like explainability, transparency, or equity.
So here, responsibility, at least in the philosophy of Hans Jonas, takes a central role, and the other terms are really related with the responsibility, which is at the center of this actual research. But maybe we can also introduce one other topic, which creates this fear actually in the general social discussion, that is the loss of maybe human autonomy. Which is also really related with the AI discussions nowadays. So that would be maybe a broad question, but how do these philosophers also consider AI as a challenge to human autonomy?
If we take, for example, Günther Anders, he is very afraid of technology here because he thinks that human autonomy basically is less and less relevant in this current system, where we present, for example, that human and the AI could be complementary, which means concretely that human becomes less necessary to conduct certain tasks. And here we are not saying if it's a good thing or a bad thing. We are just analyzing the situation, and after that we can draw our conclusions. So it's very challenging also to consider that something that could appear as inert as a technology or even AI system could be a threat to autonomy. But it could be the case nonetheless, especially, and this is very subtle and maybe difficult to understand, but still, to the fact that when we are driving projects, especially if we are at the head of a corporation like OpenAI, Alphabet, and so on, we want to drive innovation further. And that's why we are like in an automatic mode of development, in a sense that this is not a question about if we should or not develop more technology, but how we could do it ethically in the best case and to do it anyway in the worst case. So in that sense, we can see our society as in automatic pilot, in a sense that we are continuing to pursue innovation and maybe green innovation, but nonetheless, it will still be innovation. So this is why we could also consider that human autonomy in that sense is in danger. On more other case, more based to the daily experience, to be the fact that, for example, you have maybe less possibility to go outside of your information bubble because you will have this algorithmic recommendation to see what you like to see and so on. So in that sense, your autonomy is also in danger.
Actually, I'm really glad that you also brought this term innovation into discussion because it's also really related with the term progress, actually, which can be considered as a Enlightenment philosophy term. At least it was highlighted in the Enlightenment philosophy. But I think when we talk about innovation, it's not the same thing actually with the term progress, right? I mean, we cannot use these two terms as synonyms when we are describing progress or innovation. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to put it bluntly, progress will be the amelioration of every condition of existence in every domain. So for example, we can say that there is simultaneous progress in technology, on the social sphere, the economical sphere, and maybe also on the environmental sphere, and so on, where innovation, at least in the main sense of innovation, will be specifically on technological progress, which is also not the same thing as invention. So invention is the creation of a special technological artifact, where innovation is the diffusion of this technological artifact to a large scale. So this is the main difference. So one is very broad for progress, the one is very specific for innovation.
Yeah, it has gotten more clear actually. And moving on to the other topic, the relationship between AI and utopia, because utopia is a concept that was shared by those three distinct philosophers, Hans Jonas, Günther Anders, and Hannah Arendt. And there are different uses of term of utopia, like utopia, anti-utopia, and also dystopia. So maybe I should ask this question in terms of this techno-optimism, because this techno-optimism has this view that technology itself will regulate itself and it will find solutions when it's not regulated. But in the point of view of these philosophers, I mean, are they sharing this utopia of the techno-optimism, or what are the critics that are raised actually in terms of this AI ethics?
It's very interesting to see what they write about this topic, because they were in a period of time where they see the transition between what we could consider as pre-mass technical diffusion, so where it was not so common, and what it was afterwards. So it's very interesting to have the point of view of people that were before us in the past. I will say that utopia is, to put it bluntly, a concept from Thomas More, which literally means a place that does not exist somewhere. And the techno-utopia will be the concept of a perfect society that exists because there is enough technological progress to put it forward. And what is interesting with this critique, especially with AI, because now we cannot imagine techno-utopias without AI, is that for them, one of the main challenges of utopias is that this is a system that does not need human beings any longer, which is a huge challenge for responsibility, because you cannot probably be responsible for something if you are not relevant to a system. So we are going forward in the best case for societies where humans may not be necessary ideally, which is strange to put it that way, but ideally for the system to work. So this is one of the main challenge. So there is also, we could argue, some ecological costs to that, because if we have more technological development, it could be also a challenge for the environment, and not only because of the CO2, the dioxide carbon, but because also of other kind of ecological waste with some minerals, metals, and so on.
That's a really broad question, actually, because we are also talking about these specific use cases of AI, and also in the broader framework, we also see this ecological threats, and also it's really contrasts with the responsibility because we also feel responsible to leave the world as it is to the future generations, I guess so.
Absolutely. So to continue also with the previous questions about what is anti-utopia, this is a world that exists right now, but that we cannot imagine. In contrast with utopia, which is a world that we can imagine, but that does not exist yet, which is not also the same thing as dystopia, which is utopia that goes wrong. So with this other environmental aspect, it's a very concrete question right now in some region of the world, for example, because data centers, which are the core of AI functioning, needs a lot of water to work. So, and in some region of the world, like for example in south of United States, where you could have a lot of hydric stress, it could be a question of a priority of how you will address the hydric situation with populations that may need some water for their daily uses, and these data centers that require a lot of water to work on. So this is not only a question about the environment, but also about society. How we can use it fairly and with which amplitude of priority, especially for people that will suffer or are already suffering from it. Another case also that came from the United States is the fact that there is an increase in electrical bills because these data centers require also a lot of energy. And if they didn't have it, or if there is a shortage of electricity, then the price will increase. And it will be the case for everyone.
And maybe another concept that turns this utopia to dystopia is the surveillance. And we are seeing that the rise in the application of the AI systems in order to increase also the surveillance and also social control on the individual beings. So is there a perfect level of surveillance that we can also aspire when using the AI systems? Or maybe what is the relationship in the broader terms between the surveillance systems and AI ethics in this utopian analysis of these philosophers?
Well, surveillance is particularly stems from Hannah Arendt or also Günther Anders, and they are very afraid of it, and also about the possibilities that gives technology. So basically, if, let's say, European Union or any part of the world, and some of them exist already, that want to go full totalitarian, we have the technological means to do it. We already had in the past, but in a more small range. Now we could do it very basically, and this is only the political that prevent us from going there, at least until now. So surveillance is not the only mean to see what are the behaviors of people. It's also to condition them and to punish them if needed. So you have here two kinds of surveillance that we could easily identify. We can even say three to be very large. You have the one that is made by the states, that want to condition the population to be the work of state police, for example. There is the surveillance that is made by the companies to make profits. So here you will be surveyed not only to see what are your behavior and to make for you more precise publicity, but it will also be a question of modifying your behavior to make the customer more predictable. Because if you are transformed by this recommendation, you are more predictable there, you can predict profits more easily. So they will change your behavior, at least they want to make it more profitable for them. And you could also argue that there is a third kind of surveillance that is made by individuals, to other individuals. So it could be, for example, parents that want to monitor their child. So they will put a device in their backpack and see where they are going, with whom. So it's a tricky ethical question because you could argue that yes, it's for the benefit of the child, they're not mature. And there is also more intriguing case also of child that want to spy other child, for example, on Snapchat. And they are using the smartphones of their friends as a way to monitor them. So, for example, on some applications, if you don't turn off a device, it will be, by default, be turned on, which means that you will be always in surveillance in this case, which is also challenging for the psychology because we don't know what it is like to be concretely under constant surveillance by the state, by the companies, by even your peers or your parents. So this is probably something maybe not completely new, but still very challenging.
Actually, we talked really negatively about the problems that we are facing with AI technologies. A little bit turning on the bright side and taking this term responsibility back at the center of our conversation. When we face with AI technology, we have different attitudes that are actually occurring within ourselves. And what should be the correct attitude that we also maybe have when we face with the AI technology in terms of this responsibility? Because as an individual who is not really capable of affecting this whole direction of the AI technologies, I might also fear when I read articles about the dangers of the AI technology, for example. So what would be the correct attitude maybe when approaching to AI in our daily lives or as an individual?
So there is also a bright side to responsibility. So responsibility is not always to blame. It will be also to praise. So it's a good statement, of course. As individuals, we have probably three kind of choice that we can do about how we handle technology. One will be the most pessimistic one, will be a complete refusal of technology. But this is, I will say, a very minority case because, majority of people, at least in developed countries, want to use the technology, even if they could have a critical point of view of it. So then there is this second category of most users that use technology on a daily basis. They can be critical about, for example, how the data are treated. What could be, for example, the cognitive impact of generative AI on their work or on their colleagues. But even if they are critical of it, they will probably continue to use it. And there is this third option from an individual point of view always, which will be a more skilled application of AI and to increase your capacity to use this technology to be a hacker, for example. So in that sense, you are enabling yourself to be literally responsible of the development of technology because you are still in command. And you are not only a user that will maybe have some critics about technology, but you can still be an actor of it. So being an actor in that sense would be the most empowering and enhancing way of using AI.
And this question of how to approach AI in a broader point of view, what would be the maybe recommendations from these philosophers to the discussion about this regulation of the AI? What role should policymakers also take, and what responsibilities should also policymakers take actually so that the AI will not be really dangerous for the society?
I found the answers of the three philosophers that I'm working with very inspiring because they sum up not all, but a large part of what could be the answer. So for Hans Jonas, it would be that we shouldn't underestimate the challenge in face of us. So, for example, it would not be enough to make public discussion, to integrate some citizens in the development of this technique. It will be way more demanding if we really want to be responsible for that. So it means that politically, we could make responsible AI, but it will be very demanding. And we must be very careful about that and continue to work in this direction. If we take Günther Anders on the other way, he will be way more pessimistic because he will consider that AI and technology in large is following its own path and humans are more and more codependent to it and less useful. So it will be very depressing to stay in this position, but it's still interesting to hear. And Hannah Arendt will make this distinction, I think, between the legal, the ethical, and political aspect. So, for example, if you want to put a company responsible for their action, it means that their individual members should be held responsible from a legal point of view if things go wrong. Also, from an ethical point of view, you can have individual or collective vision. And from a political point of view, it could be more collective responsibility. Which means that you can consider that a company that, for example, stored your data could be considered like a public actor, a political actor, and then you could have some political consequences about it. And made it part, as this is more or less the case, by the way, of public debate.
Just one last question in our formal part, which is also, you briefly mentioned about this distinction in the Hannah Arendt's philosophy between this private sphere and also public sphere. And we also talk about the surveillance and also the over-enhancement of the AI technologies in our daily lives. Can we also talk about this highly debated concepts of private sphere and public sphere actually, or these borders between these two spheres are also crumbling in the face of these challenges with the AI?
what is very interesting with Hannah Arendt is that he envisioned what could be our current situation before the arrival of social media. So concretely, he made a distinction between private sphere and public sphere. So the private would be everything related to the relatives, to put it simply, and the public sphere would be more the political aspects. And he envisioned that these two spheres will merge together to become the social sphere. And the social sphere will be exactly what we are experiencing right now. So, for example, when we are working from home, it means that this private and public sphere are interconnected. Or when we are on social medias, we are sharing our private life publicly. So it means that there is like an obsolescence of these two categories. So what means to be under surveillance also when we are freely and we enjoy to share our private data to our friends, to even strangers sometimes with our social media accounts. So from this point of view, surveillance plays less intrusive role, or at least we are more in agreement to that.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful, insightful interview. And as traditionally, we ask our guests one last personal question. But this question will also not be alienated from the fact that you are a philosopher, because you really like philosophical walkings, if I understood correctly, which is a tradition maybe starting from back then in the antique Greece with Aristotle. So how would you actually align these philosophical walkings and also your academic philosophical activities? Is that an inspiration that you get when you walk actually, or you are doing it just for fun? I mean, how do you actually combine those two different aspects of your life?
Well, since we are in Heidelberg right now, there is also this Philosopherweg, so this path of philosophers that I have to take, I guess, for my philosophical exercise. It's true that it helped me probably even in a subconscious level sometimes to walk and just think about the different challenges that we have ahead of us. What is also interesting is that we have two ways of walking. One will be without anything on your ears, just walking and be lost on your thoughts. And the other one will be like listening to podcasts. Which is very interesting because in that way you can also learn a lot of things to stay ahead. So in a sense, you are not only walking, you are also listening. And this is also Andersian concept in the fact that we are less and less individuals, but more individuals in the sense that our different faculties can be shared by different activities in the same time. So I'm walking and I'm also listening and also seeing different things. So yeah, my authors don't left me very often.
Actually, that will be a really fine experiment for our listeners. They can also write their feelings and what they thought about when they were listening to this podcast, if they were also at the same time walking. And they can also share their thoughts and we can also reflect on them. So thank you so much for this wonderful interview. And we are right now closing our episode and we'll see you in the next episodes.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the HGGS podcast series, Ascendem. In this series, we bring you conversations with experts from a wide range of disciplines, from the social sciences to the humanities, from law to economics. If you enjoyed our podcast, we invite you to explore our previous episodes and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new episode. Stay tuned for more insightful interviews coming soon.